Deborra-Lee Furness has taken a swipe at her ex-husband Hugh Jackman after confirming she's filing for divorce, speaking for the first time about what she's described as a journey of betrayal.
There is a particular kind of public silence that speaks louder than any prepared statement ever could. It is the silence of someone who has already been through the worst of it, someone who has processed the grief, absorbed the humiliation, and made a private decision to hold their dignity intact while the rest of the world speculates, dissects, and moves on. For nearly 2 years, Deborra-Lee Furness held that silence with remarkable discipline. She gave almost no interviews. She made no dramatic declarations. She let the tabloids churn and the rumors circulate and the public narrative form without her input. And then, in May 2025, the moment arrived when she finally chose to speak. What she said, and what she chose not to say, revealed a woman who had been carefully preparing for this moment for a very long time. But to understand the full weight of her words, and the reason they landed the way they did, you have to understand the story from the beginning. Because this was never simply a celebrity divorce. This was the unraveling of a narrative that had been presented to the public as one of Hollywood's last great love stories. And the woman at the center of that narrative has now made clear, in her own measured but unmistakable language, that there is a version of events the public has not yet heard. For more than 2.5 decades, Hugh Jackman was one of the most consistent voices in Hollywood when it came to speaking about his marriage. The declarations were not occasional. They were not reserved for anniversaries or promotional tours. They were constant, detailed, and deeply personal. He called Deborra-Lee the foundation of everything. He credited her with making his career possible. He spoke about their relationship with a kind of specificity that suggested genuine feeling rather than rehearsed talking points. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 2021, he posted old wedding photographs with a caption that described their love as something that had only grown deeper with time. That being with her was as natural as breathing. The world believed him. Why would anyone not? The consistency was striking. The longevity of the marriage was striking, and Deborra-Lee herself, standing beside him at red carpets, attending premieres, raising their children quietly and without drama, appeared to be the embodiment of a partnership that had genuinely worked. She had been the one who was initially hesitant, the one who had tried to end the relationship early because of the 13-year age gap, because she understood what people would say, and because she had been in the industry long enough to know that goodwill alone does not solve structural problems, and Hugh had been the one who refused to walk away. He talked her out of leaving. He proposed within 4 months. He was certain, and his certainty appeared to be one of the most enduring things about him. 27 years later, the separation announcement came in September 2023. It was framed, as these announcements always are, in careful, mutual-sounding language. The joint statement described their situation as a shift in their journey and attributed the decision to a desire to pursue individual growth. It was the kind of phrasing that is specifically engineered to give the impression of a shared, considered decision to distribute responsibility equally across 2 people and allow both parties to exit the narrative without a designated villain. Deborra-Lee said nothing beyond that statement for nearly 2 years. The story of how the separation truly arrived, at least as the public has since come to understand it, begins in February 2022, when Hugh Jackman began rehearsals for the Broadway revival of The Music Man. His co-star was Sutton Foster, one of the most decorated performers in Broadway history, and a 2-time Tony Award winner with a formidable reputation entirely her own. The production ran through January 2023, nearly a full year of nightly performances, shared press appearances, and the particular closeness that develops between lead performers who spend that much time together on and off a stage. According to reporting by Us Weekly and multiple other outlets, what developed between Hugh and Sutton during that run became, in the words of sources inside the production, an open secret. Sutton herself spoke publicly during the run about a pre-show ritual she and Hugh had established, time they set aside specifically each night to talk and connect before going on stage. She described it warmly. In retrospect, Many observers noted that the description reads quite differently than it likely appeared at the time. Sources close to Deborra-Lee have indicated that she became aware something had fundamentally shifted during that production period. Her assessment, relayed through people close to her, was that an emotional connection had developed between the two CO stars, one that went beyond professional camaraderie, and for someone who had built her entire adult life around one person across nearly 3 decades, the nature of the connection mattered less than the fact of the turning away. When someone you have been with for that long turns their emotional attention toward another person, the specific label attached to it is almost beside the point. What made the timeline of 2023 particularly difficult to reconcile was the sequence of events that followed. In April of that year, Hugh posted a public anniversary tribute to Deborra-Lee. In May, the two of them attended the Met Gala together, walking the carpet the way they had for years, presenting the image that the world had come to associate with their marriage. 4 months after that, the separation was announced. It is worth sitting with that sequence for a moment, because what it describes is a period in which two things were simultaneously true. The public image of the marriage was being maintained, and the marriage itself had already, in some fundamental way, ended. After the September 2023 announcement, Deborra-Lee Furness went quiet.
She attended a film event in May 2024, and when a journalist asked what the previous year had taught her, she replied that she had learned she was strong and resilient. That answer, offered without elaboration or bitterness, was the kind of response a person gives when they are still in the process of surviving something and are not yet ready to fully name what it was. She was not performing composure. She was exercising it, which is a different thing entirely. Meanwhile, the other story was moving quickly. In January 2025, Hugh Jackman and Sutton Foster were photographed together in Los Angeles, holding hands after dinner in Santa Monica. Their relationship, which had existed for some time in the territory between professional connection and something more, was now confirmed and public. Sutton had filed for divorce from her husband of a decade, screenwriter Ted Griffin, in October 2024. By January 2025, both she and Hugh were free of their previous marriages, and they were no longer keeping their relationship out of the public eye. For Deborra-Lee, watching this unfold was, according to sources close to her, described as a real kick in the teeth. Not a breakdown, not a public eruption. Just that particular flatness of someone who had anticipated a difficult outcome, had prepared for it as best she could, and was now watching it arrive exactly as expected while the rest of the world treated it as exciting news. On May 23, 2025, 2 days after securing sole ownership of a Manhattan penthouse she and Hugh had shared, paying $1.7 million to place the property entirely in her name before filing a single legal document, Deborra-Lee filed for divorce in New York. That sequence of events, the property purchase followed by the filing, was not the result of impulse. It reflected legal and financial preparation that does not happen overnight. It was the move of someone who had been quietly strategizing for an outcome she had seen coming long before it became official. Alongside the filing, Deborra-Lee released a statement to the Daily Mail and People magazine. It was the first time she had spoken in anything approaching direct terms about the true nature of what had happened. She wrote, "My heart and compassion goes out to everyone who has traversed the traumatic journey of betrayal." She described their separation as a profound wound that cuts deep. She spoke about navigating the breakdown of an almost 3-decade marriage and said that returning to oneself and living within one's own integrity, values, and boundaries was ultimately liberation and freedom. The word betrayal appeared, chosen by a woman who had waited 2 years for the right moment to say exactly what she meant. She did not name Hugh directly. She did not name Sutton. She did not need to. The language was specific enough to leave no serious ambiguity about what kind of betrayal she was describing, while being measured enough to maintain the dignity she had protected throughout. People who knew her described the statement as entirely deliberate. Deborra-Lee is not someone who speaks carelessly. She is someone who had held her silence for nearly 2 years, had prepared carefully for what she wanted to say when she finally spoke, and then said it with precision. Every word was chosen. Every word counted. If May 2025 was when Deborra-Lee finally named what had happened in formal terms, May 2026 was when the ongoing reality of the situation was laid out in full public view. Hugh Jackman and Sutton Foster attended the 2026 Met Gala together, marking one of their most high-profile public appearances as a couple. According to sources, Hugh was making a point of introducing Sutton to everyone he could at the event. The Met Gala had historically been a special occasion for Hugh and Deborra-Lee, an event they had attended together multiple times across the years of their marriage. Their last joint appearance there had been in 2023, just months before the separation. Deborra-Lee's response to the Met Gala appearance was subtle but unmistakable to anyone paying attention. She liked an Instagram post that read, "Sometimes the universe removes someone from your life because they don't deserve to be in your future." She also commented on a post by Kerry Washington promoting her new television series, in which Washington had written, "You cannot trust anybody. Ever." Deborra-Lee replied, "Hilarious, so true." The comment immediately drew attention, and observers noted that it echoed her earlier language about betrayal in a way that seemed entirely intentional. These were not the actions of a woman who had moved on and closed the door. They were the actions of a woman who was choosing, carefully, and with full awareness, to make her position known without making a formal statement. It was the social media equivalent of the look across a room that requires no words. What rarely gets examined in the coverage of high-profile divorces is the financial architecture of what is being divided and what that division actually reflects about the marriage itself. The marital estate in this case was estimated at around $387 million, accumulated over nearly 3 decades. That fortune was built across Hugh's X-Men franchise earnings, his Broadway work, his endorsements, and the various properties the couple held in Manhattan, the Hamptons, Australia, and England.
But the accumulation of that fortune did not happen in a vacuum. It happened alongside a marriage in which Deborra-Lee Furness made career decisions, relocation decisions, and life decisions that were shaped around Hugh's trajectory. She put her own established career. She had been a recognized award-winning actress before Hugh was known to anyone into a supporting role, so that the architecture of the family could function around his schedule. She navigated the grief of IVF treatments and multiple miscarriages, largely without public discussion. She adopted alongside him, raised their children, moved across the world, and showed up at every event and every camera that required the image of a stable and devoted partnership. That is not a small thing. That is the kind of contribution that rarely makes headlines but is foundational to the success that does. Deborra-Lee secured the Manhattan penthouse in her name 2 days before filing for divorce. That one decision tells you something important about where she stood and how long she had been thinking about it. This was not a woman caught off guard. This was a woman who had understood, far earlier than anyone outside the situation could have known, that she needed to act with clarity and intention. Beyond the divorce settlement itself, 2 developments have continued to shape the story in 2025 and into 2026. The first is the reported memoir. Sources have indicated that Deborra-Lee has been in discussions with publishers about a book covering her marriage, the separation, and the aftermath. She has reportedly been keeping detailed personal notes throughout the separation period, described by people familiar with the situation as a diary of the entire experience. Multiple publishers are said to have expressed serious interest. Hugh was reportedly aware that the book was a possibility and had hoped she would decide against it. Sources connected to Hugh and Sutton described the prospect in terms that suggested real concern about what it might contain, and that concern, in itself, is its own kind of answer. A man who had been entirely honest about his marriage would have little reason to be troubled by his former wife's account of it. The second development involves their children, Oscar, now 25, and Ava, now 20. According to the National Enquirer and subsequent reporting, Hugh's wedding plans with Sutton have reportedly been placed on hold in part because his children remain, in the words of insiders, steadfastly loyal to their mother. They have not embraced the new relationship with enthusiasm, and Hugh is said to be reluctant to proceed to the altar until the family dynamics have settled into something more stable. For Deborra-Lee, that loyalty from their children is perhaps the most straightforward form of validation in a situation that has offered very few. There is a version of this story in which Deborra-Lee Furness is simply a woman whose long marriage ended. Marriages end. People change. Relationships run their course. That version is true, as far as it goes. But it erases something important: the specific circumstances of how this particular marriage ended, and what those circumstances say about the gap between the public image and the private reality. Hugh Jackman spent 27 years building a public identity as a devoted husband. He used that identity to enormous effect. It was part of who he was in the eyes of audiences, in interviews, in the broader cultural conversation about who he was as a person. Deborra-Lee supported that image, not just by being present, but by being unwavering, by shutting down tabloid rumors with nothing more than her consistent presence, by being the kind of partner whose steadiness made his public declarations believable. She was the one, at the beginning, who saw the risks clearly enough to try to walk away. He was the one who persuaded her to stay. 27 years later, the person who left the marriage was not the one who had initially been afraid to enter it. Her statement in May 2025 used the word betrayal. Her social media activity in the weeks after the 2026 Met Gala echoed that word without using it. The memoir she may be writing represents something that the carefully neutral joint statement of September 2023 entirely erased her account of what those 27 years actually contained from the inside. She is not performing anger. She is not collapsing publicly. She is doing what she has always done, which is to proceed with deliberate intention and careful choice. She bought the penthouse. She filed the papers. She chose the word